Hi folks, I just wanted to say a quick apologies for the short hiatus there on the channel. Several different contributing factors involved there. But anyway, don't want to hear about that. Without further ado, here's the show. Thanks for watching. Poison Study by Maria V. Snyder, part of the Chronicles of Ixia series. Chapter 4. Should we check if she's dead? Asked one of Brazil's soldiers. He held the lantern up to my door, his overloaded weapon belt jingling with motion. No, that housekeeper checks every morning and gives her a potion. We'll hear about it soon enough. Besides, it stinks in there. The other soldier waved his hand in front of his face. Yeah, if the smell doesn't kill you, the mood... Yeah, if the smell doesn't kill the mood, taking off her vomit-soaked uniform would make any man gag. Although the lantern soldier's hand briefly touched the manacles hanging from his belt, we could drag her down to the baths, clean her up, and have some fun before she dies. Oh geez, okay. No, someone would see us. If she survives, we'll have plenty of time to peel off her uniform. It'll be just like opening a present, and definitely more entertaining when she's awake. He leered. They laughed. They continued down the hallway, and were soon out of sight. I clung to the wall and wondered what I had just witnessed was real. Was I still having paranoid hallucinations? My head felt as if it had soaked too long in a pool of water. Dizziness and nausea rippled through my body. The soldiers were long gone before I worked up the nerve to go back to my room. I pushed the door wide and thrust my lantern in front of me, shining the light into every corner and under the bed. A harsh, acrid odour was the only thing to attack me. Gagging, I unlocked the shutters and threw them open, taking deep breaths of the cool, cleansing air. I looked at the nauseous puddle on the floor. The last thing I wanted to do was clean up the mess, but I knew I would never be able to sleep while breathing in that foul smell. After raiding housekeeping supply and stopping for the occasional bout of nausea, I managed to scrub the floor without fainting. Exhausted, I stretched out on the bed. It felt lumpy. I turned in my blankets, hoping to find a comfortable position. What if Brazil's soldiers came back? Asleep in bed, I would be an easy target. I had cleaned myself up, so there was no need for them to drag me to the baths. The room smelled like disinfectant, and I had forgotten to put the chair under the doorknob. Imagination kicked in. A vivid scene of me manacled to the bed, helpless, while the soldiers stripped me slowly to heighten their anticipation and savour their fear. The walls of my room seemed to thicken and pulse. I bolted into the hallway, expecting to see Brazil soldiers lurking around my door. The corridor was dark and deserted. I tried to re-enter my room. I felt as if someone had pressed a pillow against my face. I couldn't get my feet to move past the doorway. My room was a trap. The paranoia effect of my love or common sense. I wondered. Indecision kept me standing in the hallway until my stomach growled. Guided by my hunger, I searched for food. Hoping to find the kitchen empty, I was dismayed to see a tall man wearing a white uniform with 2 black diamonds printed on the front of his shirt, mumbling to himself as he lurched over the ovens. His leg didn't bend. I tried to sneak back, but he had spotted me. "Are you looking for me?" he asked. "No," I said. "I was looking for something to eat." I craned my neck back to see his face. He frowned and shifted his height to his good leg as he studied my uniform. Too thin for a cook, I thought, but he wore proper clothes and only a cook would be up this early. He was handsome in a subtle way, with light brown eyes and short brown hair. I wondered if this was Delena's Rand and Marge. I wondered if this was Delena's Rand that Marge had talked about. "Help yourself," he gestured towards the 2 steaming loaves of bread. "You just won me a week's wages." "Excuse me?" I said while cutting off a large piece of bread. Priorities, obviously. How can I win you money? You're the new food taster, right? I nodded. Everyone knows Valak gave you a dose of my love. I took a chance and bet a week's wages that you would live. He stopped to take 3 more loaves out of the oven. A big risk since you're the smallest and skinniest food tester we've ever had. Most everyone else had wagered that you wouldn't pull through, including Marge. The cook rummaged through one of the cabinets. Here, he handed me some butter. I'll make you some sweet cakes. Grabbing various ingredients from the shelf, he proceeded to mix up a batter. How many food tasters have there been? I asked him, between bites of buttered bread. Working alone didn't seem to suit him. He seemed glad to have the company. With his hands constantly in motion, he said, 5 since Commander Ambrose has been in power. Valak loves his poisons. He poisoned many of the Commander's enemies, and he likes to keep it in practice. You know, testing the food tasters from time to time to make sure they haven't grown lazy. The cook's words crawled up my spine. I felt as if my body had liquefied and pooled in a giant mixing bowl. I was just a puddle of ingredients to be beaten, stirred and used. When the cook poured the batter onto the hot griddle, my blood sizzles along with the sweet cakes. Poor Oskov, Valak never liked him, testing him constantly until he couldn't handle the pressure. The official cause of death was suicide, but I think Valak killed him. Flip. I stared at the cook deftly as the cook deftly flicked his wrist, turning the cakes over. My muscles trembled in sync with the sound of frying sweet cakes. Here I was, worried about Brazil, when one misstep with Valak, and flip, I would be gone. He probably held a couple of poisons in reserve just in case he decided to replace the taster. Glancing over my shoulder, I imagined Valak coming into the kitchen to poison my breakfast. I couldn't even enjoy talking with a chatty cook without being reminded that tasting potentially poisoned food wasn't the only danger of my new job. The cook handed me a plate loaded with sweet cakes, took 3 more loaves of bread out of the oven, and refilled his bread pans with dough. Piping hot sweet cakes were such a rare treat that I devoured them despite my unsettled stomach. Oskov was my friend. He was the Commander's best food taster. He used to come to my kitchen every morning after breakfast and help me invent new recipes. I had to keep things interesting for the Commander, or the Commander will start looking for a new cook. Know what I mean? I nodded, wiping butter off my chin. He thrust out his hand. My name's Rand. I shook his hand. Elena. I stopped at an open window on my way to Valak's office. The rising sun was just cresting the Soul Mountains to the east of the castle. The coloured sky in the sky resembled a ruined painting, as if a small child had spilled water on the canvas. I let my eyes feast on the vibrant display of life as I inhaled the fresh air. Everything was in full bloom, and soon the cool morning breeze would warm to a comfortable level. The hot season was in its infancy, and the days of sweltering heat and limp, humid nights were still a few weeks away. I had been training with Valak for a fortnight, and I wondered how long my love had held me unconscious. Tearing myself away from the window, I walked towards Valak's office, arriving at his door just as he was leaving. Elena, you've made it, Valak smiled. It's been 3 days. I was beginning to worry. I studied his face. He seemed sincerely glad to see me. Where's Marge? He asked. I haven't seen her, thank fate, I thought. Then you'll need your antidote, Valak said while moving back to his cabinet. Once I swallowed the liquid, Valak headed toward the door. When I didn't follow, he gestured to me. I have to taste the Commander's breakfast, he said, setting a quick pace. I huffed along behind him. It's time you met the Commander, and watch how food tasting should be done. We turned into the main hallway of the castle. Valak didn't miss a step, but I stumbled and stifled a gasp. The famous tapestries from the king's era were torn and soiled with black paint in Brazil's orphanage. In Brazil's orphanage, we had been taught that each tapestry represented a province in the Old Kingdom. Hand-quilted with gold thread during the course of many years, the coloured silk pictures told a story about the history of each province. Now in rags, they still told a very powerful tale about the commander's rule. The commander's disdain for the opulence, excess, and injustices of the former ruler and his family was well known throughout Ixia. From monarchy to military, the changes in Ixia were severe. While some citizens embraced the simple but strict rules of the code of behaviour, others rebelled by refusing to wear their uniforms, by not requesting permission to travel, and by escaping to the south. Based on the offence, the insurgents' punishment matched exactly what was written in the code. No uniform meant 2 days chained naked in the town square. It didn't matter if the offender had a legitimate reason, the punishment was always the same. Ixia's people discovered that there wasn't going to be any guessing about their punishment, no bribing or good old boy networking either. The commander meant business. Live by the code, or face the consequences. I pulled my eyes away from the tapestries in time to see Valak disappear through an arched doorway decorated with lavish stonework. Splintered wooden doors hung crookedly on their hinges, but the intricate carvings of trees and exotic birds were still visible. Another victim of the takeover, and another reminder of the commander's intent. I stopped in amazement just past the broken doors. This was the castle's throne room. Inside was a sea of desks occupied by numerous advisors and military officers from every military district in the territory. The room hummed with activity. It was hard to distinguish individuals in the commotion, but I finally spotted Valak's smooth stride as he went through an open door at the back of the room. Finding a path around the maze of desks took some time, but when I arrived at the door, I heard a man's voice complaining about cold sweet cakes. Commander Ambrose sat behind a plain wooden desk. His office was stark in comparison to Valak's and lacked personal decorations. The only object in the room that did not have a specific purpose was a hand-sized statue of a black snow cat. The cat's eyes glinted with silver and bright specks of the metal, peppered in the beast's powerful back. The commander's black uniform was perfectly tailored and immaculate, indistinguishable from Valak's, except that the diamonds stitched on the collar were real. They twinkled in the morning light. The commander's black hair was sprinkled with grey and cut so short that the strands stood straight up. In Brazil's classroom, we had learned that the commander avoided public appearances and having his portrait painted. The fewer people who knew what he looked like, the less his chances were of being assassinated. Some thought he was paranoid, but I believed that since he gained power by using assassinations and covert warfare, he was merely being realistic. This was not the commander I had envisioned, burly, bearded, and weighed down with the medals and weapons. He was thin, clean-shaven, with delicate features. "Commander, this is Yelena, your new food taster," Valak said, pulling me into the room. The commander's gold, almond-shaped eyes met mine. His gaze had the sharpness of a sword point. It pressed against my throat and fastened me to the floor. I felt myself being drawn out and examined. When he looked over at Valak, I swayed with relief. "From what Brazil's been hollering about, I expect her to be a fire breather," the commander said. I stiffened on hearing Brazil's name. If Brazil was complaining to the commander, I could be back in the line for the noose. "Brazil's a fool," Valak said. "He wanted the drama of a public hanging for his son's killer. I personally would have taken care of her immediately. It would have been within his rights." Valak slurped the commander's tea and sniffed the sweet cakes. My chest was tight. I was having trouble drawing in air. Besides, It's clearly written in the code of behaviour that the next to be hanged gets the job offer. And Brazil was one of the authors, cutting a piece of one sweet cake from the centre and the other from the side. Valak put both pieces in his mouth, chewing slowly. Here, he handed the plate to the commander. Brazil does have a point, the commander said. He picked up his tea and stared at its contents. When does she start? I'm getting tired of cold food. A few more days. Good, the commander said to Valak. Then he turned to me. You arrive with my food, taste quick. I don't want to be looking for you, understand? Feeling light-headed, I answered, yes, sir. Valak, I'm losing my weight because of you. Lunch is in the war room, don't be late. Yes, sir, Valak said, and headed for the door. I followed. We wound our way through the tangle of desks. When Valak stopped to consult with another advisor, I glanced around. A handful of the commander's advisors were women, and I noticed 2 female captains and 1 colonel. Their new roles were one of the benefits of the takeover. The commander assigned jobs based on skill and intelligence, not on gender. While the monarchy preferred to see women work as maids, kitchen helpers, and wives, the commander gave them the freedom to choose what they wanted to do. Some women preferred their former occupations, while others jumped at the chance to do something else, and the younger generation had been quick to take advantage of the new opportunities. When we finally reached Valak's office, Marge was dusting around Valak's piles of papers on the table. It looked to me as if she was spending more time reading the papers than straightening them. Did Valak notice? I wondered what Marge did with Valak besides cleaning. Marge turned a pleasant face to Valak, but as soon as he walked away, she glared fiercely at me. Must have lost a lot of money betting against my survival, I thought. I smiled at her. She managed to control her outraged expression before Valak glanced up from his desk. Yelena, you look exhausted. You make me tired just looking at you. Go rest. Come back after lunch and we'll continue your training. I didn't really feel tired, but rest sounded like an excellent idea. As I moved along the hallway, Valak's comment wormed its way through my mind. My pace slowed and I dragged my feet towards my room. I was so preoccupied with the physical effort of walking that I bumped right into 2 of Brazil's guards. Looky, Wren, I found a rat, one guard exclaimed, grabbing my wrist. Alert, I gasped. I grasped the green diamonds on the guard's uniform. Good for you, Wren said. Let's show your catch to the General Brazil. The General isn't fond of live rats, especially this one. The guard shook me hard. Pain coursed up my arm to my shoulder and neck. In a panic, I searched in the hallway for help. It was deserted. That's right, he prefers them skinned alive. I'd heard enough. I did what any good rat would do. I bit down on the guard's hand until I tasted blood. Yelping and cursing in surprise, his grip lessened. I jerked my arm out of his grasp and ran.